Hey, welcome to the Table at Central. My name is George,
And I'm Justin.
and we're here to dive deeper into the themes, stories, and culture that are central to our church. Well, here we are. We just wrapped up. Well, you just wrapped up
Indeed.
the Seeds series. How do you feel? do you feel
I'm
after the
grateful.
weekend?
It was a great series. Got to hear from a lot of different voices. Appreciate you guys giving me a slot that wasn't going to automatically get me canceled. Of course, I still had to poke at things because
It's who you are.
that's who I am. I like to poke at things.
I hope you enjoyed your last time ever speaking at Central Church.
I've been trying to get there for so long, but you all keep bringing me back. So we'll see.
I don't know why. I'm just kidding.
Sure.
You always do a great job. You're a
Thank
great
you.
communicator.
Appreciate that.
You spoke on the topic of legacy, which I think is the perfect way to finish the series. We're talking about making all these decisions and, the concept of starting with seeds, with starting with the small stuff and how
Sure.
it can lead to great things. And I think it was a great reminder that all of these things, they can amount to something in the near future, whether it be, a year from now, 2 years from now, but, kind of zooming out a little bit and allowing us to think about how the decisions that we make, the seeds that we plant today, they have implications for the further future, and how, just getting us to think about these things
Sure.
and how they even impact life after we're gone, the
Sure.
people that are, that we leave behind. I think that's super important to think about. And so we'll talk about legacy today, but I wanted to kind of start with what legacy you're a part of. You can talk a little bit about your parents, your grandparents, just the legacy of faith that you come from, how it's played a part in your life.
Sure. Well, going back to what you said a moment ago of seeing seeds come out a year or two, and I even brought this up a few times. I mean, there's some times that you'll never see that come to fruition, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're laying down seeds and we're planting things that isn't for us to reap and may not even take place in our lifetime, but who knows how far down the road the things that we're doing today will impact somebody.
Right.
As far as my legacy, man, I don't even know where to start. Immigrant parents. My parents came here when they were teenagers, which is wild to think. My dad was 17
Yeah.
when he came to America, and obviously wanted to bring a better life for himself, better life for his family, and as you can probably relate, that's
the exact same story that I have.
As
they were
immigrant,
teenagers,
right?
too.
Well, as immigrants, right? You're
Yeah.
coming to start a new life. Like it's not necessarily a level playing field, and I think that probably the generation before us
Yeah.
had to work a lot harder,
Right.
and they had to do a lot more than probably we had to do to, as best as they can, level the playing field so that we have the opportunity to plant our roots and
Right.
create our own future. And so obviously I'm very, very grateful for that, because
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine how different my life would be in South India
Right.
somewhere
Yeah.
versus, North Texas. Like,
Yeah.
just talk about a completely
Right.
different world just based off of proximity or geography.
Yeah, that's crazy. I completely relate to that. That's literally the exact same
Yeah.
background that I have. My parents came here when they were teenagers as well. They were really young. My dad started a business when he was really young, and that's the business that provided for our family
Sure.
for many years.
Lots of postage stamps.
lots of I'm not even gonna get into that.
Sure.
Inside joke at this point, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it was the kind of the same thing. Like, I can't imagine what my life would have been like had I not, grown up here. And
Sure.
part of that legacy for me is, I think you can probably relate to this, but it's the being so connected to the place that your parents come from,
Sure.
while also growing up in this very different place that is the U.S., and kind of living between the two cultures and upbringings. And for me, there's always been this element of hard work. I don't feel like the legacy that I'm a part of isn't, this wealthy legacy, but the wealth is in the ability to do
Sure.
hard work. You know what I mean?
The opportunity.
The opportunity
Sure.
to take advantage of opportunities, and there's some faith things in there as well, but I'm sure that there's a lot of people that probably relate to that.
Yeah.
I think it's good to think about right? Like I think it's good to be reminded of not just before you think about the legacy that you want to leave behind, also thinking about the legacy that you're a part of, whatever that may be.
Sure.
What would you say to people that, maybe have a hard time thinking about those things, that, you may ask them this question like, hey, what legacy do you come from? And their answer might be like, you don't want to know. Like,
Sure.
I did not have good parents. I did not have a good background, a good family. Like, what would you say to those people that are kind of thinking about legacy, but they don't have that background? You know?
I mean, I think it goes back to just even the theme of the series that's not up here, but tomorrow starts today, right? And we had that on the cards, and we had that distributed. And I think there's so much that we can take from where we came from, but the truth is it's up to us to set the trajectory of what's to come from here on out. And man, I've got so many stories of people that grew up in an environment that was setting them up for failure, right? But they decided to change and shift and make a life. And once again, tomorrow starts today. So what you're planting today can certainly make a big impact on where things go.
Yeah. I want to talk about in a minute, like, I want to ask you what legacy you want to leave behind. But before that, I'd like to know how your view on legacy has changed over the years. Because I think this is one of those topics that you don't really think about when you're young.
Are you
like,
trying to say that I'm old, George?
Yes, that's exactly. That was the nice way of me saying, saying like I'll say you're a lot more seasoned than I am. Wow. But I'm just saying, like, I didn't start really thinking about legacy until, just a few years ago. It's not something I thought about when I was a teenager. I didn't think about it when I was in my early 20s. So like your view on it changes as life goes on. I'm thinking about it a lot more today, and you're a few years ahead of me. I'll say the word few.
Sure.
Just a few.
Just a couple.
3 or 4 years maybe tops.
Couple tops.
You could not be my dad. You're not old enough to be my dad.
Sure.
But how has it changed over the years?
Yeah.
Just with experience, did you think about legacy when you were much younger, or is it something that you started thinking about recently? How has that been in your journey?
Obviously, I think about it more today. My firstborn's about to be a teenager, which is wild for me to think of, right? And I can even going back to what I shared about, my father coming here as a teenager, and both of us, like how much that's impacted generations to come.
Yeah.
And every strategic move that we've made, from relocating across state lines to where we're deciding to plant a home, or, what church we are a part of, like that has such a big impact on someone's upbringing and where they go. And so I look at that closer now, right? Every move that we make is not just about today, but what impact will this have years down the road?
Yeah. How has God played a part in all of that? Like, what's been the tie between, your process of leaving a legacy and your spiritual journey with God? How has he spoken into that,
I would like to think he's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I was told at a young age that, you pursue God and these things will be added, right? And so I think oftentimes, you're searching for God's will and you're pursuing like God's direction. And if you shift your mindset instead of pursuing his will and pursuing him, I think it's impossible to miss his will. Right. And so I think that if you live a life that's pleasing, acceptable, and in pursuit of Christ himself, that these things will fall into place for you. You don't have to think about those things of, hey, am I in God's will? And you can live rest assured knowing that you are.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, as I've been thinking about legacy more, I think my first filter has been, you said it, like God's will. Like whatever it is that I leave behind, I want it to be, God ordained.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like I could sit down and think about, what type of legacy I want to leave behind, and it could be through just like my personal preference and opinion, but at the end of the day, I'd like it to be what God ordains, the whatever God's will is for my life. And I think that's a good point, as long as you're following him and you're becoming a disciple of him, you can't miss it. That's what my mentor used to say when I was in college. He used to say, because we'd have these conversations, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life.
Sure.
And at this point, I'm not really thinking about legacy. I'm just thinking about where am I going in the near future? Like, what am I going to do after college? And, he used to tell
me for dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't think that far
Yeah,
out.
how am I going to pay for dinner?
Sure, right.
Not just what's for dinner.
Yeah,
What can I
understood.
afford to eat
Sure,
for
of
dinner?
course.
And he used to say the same thing. Like, as long as you're following him, you can't miss it.
Right.
I think that's such that's an important part of this conversation of legacy, because I think at least for me, it can feel so intimidating, to think about this. You ask me like, how do you want people to remember you? Like, that's a
Sure.
huge question.
Right.
That's a huge question to answer I think at any age, to have to answer like, what will people say about you?
Right.
But I think that there's a little bit of peace and it kind of grounds you a little bit when you can just remember like, well, I think first step, I just need to be following Christ.
Sure.
And those things will kind of play out. But I think it is important to establish those things at some point, So
Sure.
would you say that it's ever too late to start thinking about legacy?
No, I don't think so. We talked about this a little bit yesterday of just even the biblical premise around the almond tree and
Yeah.
what's the third most common noun in the Bible, George?
Trees.
But I think that it's never too late, and I think that
Yeah.
God always has purpose. And I think the more life experience you have, the more you have to offer. And I just don't think it's ever too late by any means.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say, as long as you've got breath in your lungs,
Come on.
you can think about legacy,
Yeah.
So I want this to be encouraging for people that listen, no matter
Sure.
what stage they're at,
Right.
what age they have. Like, this is an important thing to be thinking about.
Of course.
So let's talk about the legacy that you specifically would like to leave behind. Like, you think about your kids, which I would assume is probably the most important thing, or the most important aspect
Sure.
to the legacy that you want to leave behind. From anybody that I've spoken to, that your children are the most important aspect of legacy.
Sure.
It's not just the career, it's not just the things that you accomplish, but for the most part, most people would say, the type of kids that they raise, where they end up and what they leave behind for their kids. So what does that specifically look like for you and for Tiffany, that legacy that you guys want to leave behind, including your kids or anything else?
Sure. When it comes to kids, I think that we're already thinking, they're barely teenagers. My daughter's 8, and part of us is already having the conversation, like, where are they going to end up? Like, what kind of life are they going to live?
Yeah.
Are they going to find success? Are they going to find their place? Are they going to find their lane when it comes to career? But obviously, I think we'd all agree on the most important thing to us is that they find their life in Christ.
Yeah.
And they find this identity, and I think they're starting to understand it and grasp it, and we're starting to have some deep conversations with an 8-year-old man at bedtime. It's wild, some of the things that she comes up with, but part of me recognizes that God's tugging on her heart, and she has a heart for Christ, and so does my son. And so obviously there's so much that you can measure here on earth, but what's most important is their walk with Christ.
Yeah. What you said you're having these conversations with them. What are some like practical things that you guys are doing today? You probably already have this legacy
Sure.
in mind, and so this whole concept of seeds, tomorrow starts today. What are some things that you guys are doing today that you're hoping will flourish tomorrow?
Sure. Well, I think who you surround yourself with is everything, right? And I
Yeah.
look at my life and my upbringing, and so much of who I am today is because of my surroundings. And so we're very intentional with who they are spending their time with. We're very intentional with where they are on Sundays.
Yeah.
We're very intentional with their relationships that they're building and the events that they're going to and camps and whatnot, because we recognize how life-changing that can be. And then, obviously our nightly devotionals and our prayer time together, those are some things that are just part of what we do.
Is there any aspects of the legacy that you think about that doesn't include your kids? Is there anything outside of that?
I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything right now.
Is that a big question?
Just on a non-spiritual level, I think
Yeah.
that there's some levels of success that people want to achieve, and I think, just leaving your mark on something, right? I remember when I shared the story of us going to Ireland, and I remember going into it, there's so much talk, and our youth pastor at the time said, leave your mark in Ireland, leave your mark in Ireland. And I remember the entire time I was there, I'm just like, how can I leave my mark? Like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do here that 20, 30, 40 years down the road, people will come back and be like, oh, this is a result of whatever. And I shared some of the stories yesterday, and I have no idea, looking back, the summer of 2003, what residuals came from it, from the Bible studies, from the hard work, from the yard work that we did, all the silly things that we thought we were doing in ministry. And I remember there's this book that we had to fill out at the end of like, hey, I came to leave my mark in Ireland, but I'm leaving with Ireland's mark in me.
Yeah.
And so part of me is like, as much as I can, I want to leave a mark.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to like connect with anybody from Ireland afterwards?
we still have relationships with some of the
Okay.
people, but so social media wasn't a thing back in 2003.
What?
George, we didn't have phones. We actually had to
was
email
that
home.
like?
Yeah, we had to email back home. We took pictures with, there's a thing called a disposable camera, what's
Oh, I know what
wild,
that is.
We took pictures
And you just threw them away.
and we didn't get to see what these pictures looked like until months later when we were back home.
Oh, I thought you
And-
never got to see them because they're disposable.
No, you take pictures,
And then you just throw them away.
something like that. I'll share more later.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a different time. And so, yeah, today world would be different, right? We would connect and we
Right.
would have those hopefully lifelong relationships. But part of me wonders like what impact, what residuals are still there from our time in Ireland.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of makes you think about how much of this journey of building a legacy, how much is it affected by our desire to want to see it play out,
Sure.
or our desire to want to see the impact that
And
we
it's
leave behind.
frustrating
Yeah.
to not see it, right? It's
Right.
frustrating when you feel like you're investing your energy and your effort and your resources and time into something, and you know it's coming from a good place, but never knowing what transpires from there
Yeah.
is frustrating.
Yeah.
I share the story of my friend Brandon, and ironically, you probably don't even know this, but he actually had spent a weekend with us at Central Church many, many years ago. And as he was sharing his frustrations of, sometimes just never knowing what happens, I was like, bro, you actually, some of the language that you taught us back then, some of the systems you introduced us to, we're still doing today.
Yeah.
I remember he came in, and one of the things that he shared with the staff at the time is like, this feels like very much an inward focused church.
Mhm.
And I remember at the time it was difficult to understand. We didn't really know what he was talking about until time had passed and we kind of started to see it, and we shifted a lot of things. And I remember shortly after his trip here, I actually went on a trip. I went to Ohio to go see my beloved Buckeyes. So when I say OH, you say,
I-O.
there you go, OH.
I-O.
There you go.
Listen, I'm a Texas fan.
Okay, understood.
I feel weird just even saying that.
That's okay.
I'm not even from Ohio.
It's okay.
Okay. But
Anyways.
just for you, I'll do it, I guess.
Anyways, my whole point is, I remember in one weekend I went to go visit, and I'm not going to say who it is, but I went to visit
Who was it?
2 different churches. Both friends of mine invited me, and this is fresh after Brandon spent a weekend with us. And the first church I went to, mind you, I was invited. I was there by myself. I was there just for the game and had some extra time. And I walked in, and it looked like a big family, right? But I felt like a big outsider. Nobody came and said hi to me. I ended up sitting by myself, and it was and church was great
Yeah.
worship, great word, all those things. But I was like, oh man, like I understand what he was saying about inside versus outside. And then from there, I actually went to a different church, literally within just a few hours. And as I got to the parking lot, there was somebody there with a sign that I rolled down the window, and they're like, hey, is this your first time here? And show me where to park. They're like, hey, we've got a parking spot for you. They met me at my door. They walked me in. I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. And I
Yeah.
remember coming back and just sharing this with our staff. And I told it to Brandon, I was like, hey, you have no idea, right? Because sorry, dude, we haven't invited you back for
Yeah.
whatever reason. But it actually made a big impact.
Yeah.
And so, I think we all have those stories of like, did what I do actually matter?
Yeah.
Did anything actually take place from what I did? And so, yeah, I get it, man. It's frustrating.
Yeah. What would you say to the people that might be listening to this and they feel that, they're in a place where they feel like they're investing a lot, I'm sure that the wheels have started turning for a lot of people as we've been talking about these, the seeds and like,
Sure.
all right, like, yeah, I'm going to start planting seeds. I want, I want to start today because I want God to do something tomorrow, all
Right.
that stuff. But sometimes it feels like this is going nowhere.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I think we as humans just want that gratification. We want that fulfillment. And
Yeah.
I think we got to put that emotion aside and don't stop planting, right? Sometimes we're called to plant and maybe someone else is going to water, but as scripture says, God's the one that gives the increase.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement would be don't stop planting.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I love that. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and being here today. You're one of the people that I tend to call when you always say, you joke when you answer the phone, like I only call you when I need something.
Yeah.
But you've become like a big brother. You've got this voice in my life that
We can just say brother. It doesn't have to be big
no,
brother.
it's got to be older brother. Almost dad.
Yeah.
But you've become this voice in my life that I know I can lean on when I'm needing somebody. And so I just wanted to tell you, I really appreciate that, knowing that I have somebody in my life that, like I said, is a few years ahead of me. And
Just a couple.
And I can just a few, not that much.
Mhm.
But that I can call and I can,
Sure.
kind of process some of these things sometimes, because I'm in the middle of, the starting my family and
Sure.
starting all of these things, and you're a little further ahead. It's good for me to have somebody, especially when it comes to the topic of legacy. And so,
Sure.
I mean, I would just encourage people, watching or listening, find somebody.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and
yeah.
you don't have to make those same mistakes,
Right.
right? And so I kind of talked about this yesterday, but invest in relationships come
Yeah.
from the lens of like, what can I add to this versus what can I get out of it? And
That's
I
good.
appreciate the last few times you've called me, you didn't need something because you don't call me enough. And usually when you do call me, it's because you need something, but I appreciate how that shifted. And
really making me look bad.
No, I'm kidding. We love you, George. Love you a lot. And I love a relationship, and
Yeah.
I love you, son.
I love you too. But yeah, I would encourage people to find somebody, like
Sure.
find somebody that they can that is further ahead than they are,
Sure.
that they can lean on, that they can call, even if it seems
I
like
certainly had that in my life. My goodness,
Yeah.
and I'm thankful for that. There's so
Yeah.
many people in my life that I can look back and talking about seeds, right? People that throughout my childhood dropped those nuggets, dropped those seeds that still I hold on to dearly. Some of the things that were spoken in
Yeah.
to my life that are still true today. So, I had that, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be that today.
Yeah, find that. If you're listening, if you're watching, find somebody that you can lean on, that you can call. I've loved this series. I'm excited for the next one. In all things, the way of worship. We're going to be talking about worship. And so super excited about that. We'll be back next week with Isaiah. But
Let's go.
thank you, Justin. Thanks for being here on the podcast. You'll be on again for sure.
Cool.
I
hope Isaiah's here next time. I really am bummed out that he wasn't
We miss
here.
Isaiah
We
today.
miss Isaiah.
We miss Isaiah. We miss you, Isaiah.
We miss you, Isaiah.
But hey, we'll see you next week at the table.
At the table.